Hello. Welcome to the show. This is This, Not That, your marketing advice, 15 minutes of fame for you to do what you need to do to grow your business. And this week, myself and my co host, Anka, good morning, Anka,
Hello, hello.
are talking about, we're kicking off a series on how to promote your business for the holiday season. And you may be thinking, October, holiday season. Well, now is the time to plan. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, yeah, hell yeah. If you haven't started, you better get your butt into gear.
That's right. And so, one of the ways that you can actually promote during the holiday season that you may not have thought of is by collaborating and getting in front of some other audiences. And Anka is a master at this. I am growing my expertise at this. And there are some things to watch out for when you move down this road. So, we thought we would just dive into a few of the things that we've encountered that work well and things that maybe we wish we would have not done, but hindsight's 2020.
Yep, yep.
So, Anka, do you want to dive in and tell us about some of your best collaborations, how they came about, and you know the good parts of collaborating?
Yeah. The good parts, I think the best thing that happens in a collaboration is when both parties or everybody involved really benefits from it and walks away, better than they were before. And that usually happens when you collaborate with somebody who serves your audience in a slightly different way, right? So when you're not sort of kind of doing the same thing, just talking about, but when it's literally, and I remember actually somebody at the, I don't remember who it was, otherwise I would give him credit, but it was, he explained how people are on a buying, like on a journey, right? So like say, let's for example, take people build a business, so they're on a journey. And your service kind of hits that journey at some point, right? So you are in there, you come in there because they're in a certain situation, they have a problem they want fixed, they have something they want to achieve, and you help them achieve the thing. So somebody beforehand helped them get to where they were. So they basically solved the problem for them and created a problem, and that's the problem that you help them fix. Now, when they're done working with you, you've solved that problem, but the very solution has created the next problem for them. So it's moved them along. So then there's the next person who helps them with that thing. So ideally, if you can collaborate with somebody who sits right before, right after you on that journey, so somebody who creates the problem you solve, or somebody who solves the problem you create, these collaborations tend to work really, really well because it's not just lucrative for you, but it's also really added value for the people because they just get more help in sort of all in one go. So it's really like a win-win-win situation. That's your ideal case.
I love that. And so, I'm going to use a practical example of us. We do very similar things. But you are attracting people at a different part of the journey. And so one of the things that we've talked about for collaboration is that, people build their list. They have this great list and they email them like maybe for their launch and then they never talk to them again. And
Mhm.
so the reason you and I can collaborate is that I'm like, the next step in that journey is like, okay, so they didn't buy the first time, but no means no, right, not right now. And so then where I would plug into that is to help them keep communicating and growing that and building that relationship. And so that's a really great collaboration because we're both
Yeah.
in our genius zones, we're both doing what we love, and we're both in it to help people. Now, if we threw in like another great collaborator, could probably possibly be somebody that does paid ads. And that would be a great collaborator on your end, but also on my end, to get people on the list, to get people to grow awareness about somebody's brand. And so you are absolutely right when we're talking about collaborations and how we can connect with the right people. And so many times I see these summits and there's like no single thread that's weaving them together. And
Trust me, we
so
have done those. I've
not
done one of those.
only is there no
Mhm.
room for collaboration because your businesses are so different, but you have confused your audience, which I think is really detrimental because if the audience doesn't know why they're there or all these other people are, there for whatever particular reason, it's confusing to them and they're not going to join in or they're not going to get the biggest benefit from that opportunity.
they're not
So
even going to sign up because if you, and I can tell you because I've done it, right? A few years ago, we hosted a summit with a bunch of friends. And so we basically came from this angle of, hey, we just want to share our message, right? Let's just do something together. And now, okay, you are into relationships, you do this other thing, you are into burnout, I'm into tech. So let's just find something that encapsulates like kind of like something that sort of covers all of us, right? And now what happens when you do that? You come out with some really generic, vague title for it that nobody feels spoken to, right?
yes,
That's the problem. So it's like when you come at it from this, like, what do I want to shove down people's throat? It won't work. So you have to come from the lens of what would be helpful for the people you want to serve.
exactly. And I think if you look at an online event or an online collaboration or an online summit, which is a lot of what we're talking about, that's a lot of what we do. It resembles a, a typical networking experience. Like there are really good networking experiences in person, and there are some that are not so good. And the ones that are trying to, I always think about, we used to do these events like in person, and there would be like an acupuncturist, and there would be like somebody that was doing Pampered Chef, and then there would be me doing marketing. It was like just all these random people, and there's no connection. And so people would come in for one person, then the other person would feel like, oh, this wasn't really worthwhile for me. And it's the same kind of thing. You really want to be strategic about who you're wanting to collaborate with and where you, as Anka said, where the people that you're wanting to talk to are in their journey, and who can fill in that problem solving piece. Like, is it you, or is it the person before you, or the person after you? And knowing, I think this is another big key point here, that no matter what, the universe is abundant and there is enough for everybody. And I think that's one of the things that like newer entrepreneurs can't really wrap their head around, is like, oh no, they're doing it, so I can't do it, or I can't be with them because they do what I do. And I think if you can just open yourself up to possibility that not only can you work together and collaborate together, but there's enough business for both of you, that really opens a lot of doors.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, one thing I wanna really make sure we mention is it's something that I've done it, so I know, and I see it a lot. It's when people first start out, you'll see a lot of collaboration with people who's starting out, and it's almost I'd call it fear-based collaboration, right? When you're kind of not quite sure you can pull it off by yourself, when you're kind of scared to host an event on your own, you just collaborate because it feels safer with
Mhm.
somebody else, right? So now there are obviously, that's the thing. It comes down to where you're coming from with this. Well, yes, okay, you might say, okay, this other person has a much bigger audience than I have. So by that collaboration, I get in front of their audience, which obviously would be helpful. But quite often you see it when it's two newbies, and there's no real benefit other than that they're both scared of doing it. They're not sure they can bring people in, and they're not sure they can kind of deliver the goods by themselves. So they kind of hide behind that other person. So, and there's nothing wrong with that unless and you just need to be conscious that it doesn't solve all your problems, right? So I would say, like most of the time, you are perfectly capable of delivering the goods by yourself. If the other person hasn't got an audience, well, then you're probably not going to get much out of. You're not going to get in front of more people by collaborating with somebody else who has no audience. So that's not helpful, and it also opens up a whole rabbit hole of potential issues, right? So sometimes I've done collaborations where I ended up pulling out because even people would go, you stupid, like you're doing all the work. And then you go 50-50, right? So there's this like who does what, right? And then whatever list you create, like, because that's the thing, even if you have an audience, well, whose is it? Is it mine? Is it yours? Is it ours? Who owns that list?
Mhm.
Who can market to that list after all? So it opens up a whole bunch of other questions. So it's not an easy way out, right? Collaborating with somebody can be incredibly effective and it's fun and all of that, but you don't want to come at it from a fear-based position, and you definitely don't want to underestimate that you have to work with somebody else, right? And
The work,
coordinate everything. Yeah.
yeah, the work still needs to be done. And I think the other piece is that, just to touch on this, you can collaborate. You might have 3, 4, or 5 people, like you do a lot of summits. But if you aren't really clear about how you help people, and this is somewhere else that people get stuck, and you are in the summit and people can't really clearly identify with you and identify with what you do, you're going to have a really hard time standing out in their mind and differentiating yourself from the other people in the summit, so that when you start sending those emails, like if you do share the list or they sign up for your list in some way, um, they may never even get to that point where they sign up for your list because they don't know what you do. And so if you are collaborating, that's the other thing that I wanted to mention is, like, be really clear about how you're showing up in that collaboration and what it is you're going to serve that particular audience. Because a lot of times, like I mentioned earlier, you and I have some overlap. We do some of the similar things, but we were really clear before we collaborated what our differentiation point was. And so when you can clearly communicate that to people, it's going to trigger a response in them to know whether or not they're a good fit for you right now. And so that's what I would put. So do we have anything we want to add in here about specifically for the holiday season? Because I know a lot of times people, they don't really think about collaborations until it's too late. So that's one of the reasons we're doing it right now, because it takes some time to put it together.
I think one thing I've seen, and I do a lot of, I guess there's collaborations. Like you can kind of put together co-host a whole program, or you could just basically, you send an email to your list about my thing, and I do the same for you. That's sort of like, the collaboration light version, and anywhere in between. So you can get really creative. But I think the more established somebody is in their business, and the more they're kind of using email marketing, the longer in advance their schedule is booked.
Yeah.
Like I've had conversations literally last week and this morning where we're talking, okay, so what are you, have you got a week free in like September 23? I'm like, I don't even know when I'm going to be alive then, right? So it's like, I don't really have everything super fixed, but it's like, yeah, when you deal with people more established, their capacity to collaborate with anybody is going to be, they're going to be booked out.
Yeah.
So you don't want to come, if you come and say, oh, can you email for me tomorrow? Well, chances are I can't. Right?
Yeah.
So if somebody can, well, then that's the thing. You can start out initially when you've got nothing else to do. Well, then, everybody can kind of do something tomorrow, but you definitely want to start, because you also have to think about, like, where does that go? What is it that you want to offer at the end of that?
Yeah.
And then work backwards from there. So you don't really want, if you just sort of wing it, it's a real giant waste of time.
Yeah. Well, and then you feel it's disappointing because you feel like you've put a lot of work into it, and then it doesn't lead to anything at the end of the line. Like you don't get new leads, you don't get new customers. And you brought up a lot of points that I talk about the same thing all the time, is like, you got to have a plan. And I think a lot of times especially if you're dealing with those bigger names and people that are maybe a little bit further along the journey than you are, you're absolutely right. Because those people not only have their calendars booked out, but they have team members that manage all of those different things for them. And so you may not even be talking to the person until the time of the summit or the recording or the interview or whatever it is you're trying to put together. And so it is not far fetched to think that people are booked out into next year already. Because, I'm thinking just about some of the people that I would like to get on my podcast, and I'm looking at them and they're like, yeah, we have time in 2024. And so, it's like, okay, well, let's see what that looks like. But that really makes you step up your game. So I'm glad you brought that out and let people know. Anything else you want to add before the end of this episode? We're hitting our 15-minute mark here pretty quick. And
I think the other thing, the one last thing I would want to throw in there is to sort of start with people who are sort of in your league and then grow together, right? People always think, oh, if I collaborate, I have to get somebody really famous. Yes, okay, if you get somebody famous to promote your stuff, you're going to have instant visibility, but the chances, there's nothing in it for them to be seen next to you, right? So
Yeah.
you really at the beginning haven't got much to offer to somebody like that. So, and it's going to be really hard work to get them to even think about collaborating with you, and then they're going to treat you like they're doing you a favor,
Yeah.
right? So I think you're better off starting out getting 10 new subscribers from somebody else who's in a similar boat as you, and as you grow, you just sort of grow together and build from there, you know. So I think it also gives you time to get better at that whole game of collaboration. So I don't think, you know, don't jump the gun.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's a good reminder that everybody starts somewhere. All of these people that we look up to in the industry or whatever, they all started where we are at some point, and they've built their business and have collaborations with people who were with them on that journey. And so there's no saying that we couldn't be the next generation of where they are, the next version. And so that's that's totally true. And just kind of think, be open to possibility, but also be aware and be strategic.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We'll be back next week. I have a frog in my throat. We'll be back next week with another This Not That series. If you have questions or topics that you would like for us to cover, leave them in the comments. We always look at those and we always respond. And we would love to be able to feature you and your question or suggestion on a show. So thanks again for tuning in. In the meantime, take care, stay well, and be safe.
See you next week.